Alright, hello all you crazy people out there. My name is Dragonite, and welcome back to what I said I was not going to do any more of. In this tutorial, I'm going to be talking about particle effects, like the one that you can see on the screen right now. I call it Fire. It's quite cool looking, I think. And to demonstrate particle effects, I'm going to close out of there. I have an empty Game Maker Studio 2 project, except for a cloud sprite. By the way, this is Game Maker Studio 2. But the particle effect mechanisms have not changed a whole lot since Game Maker Studio 1, so if you're using that version of the game engine, it should work as well. Possibly with some minor tweaking, but for the most part it should work exactly the same. I will create a version of this compressed Game Maker project to download that's for Game Maker Studio 1 as well. Anyway, I don't have anything besides this cloud sprite. I'm going to go create an object, and I'm going to call it, how about, particle system, and I'm going to go and drag particle system into the room here. It does not have a sprite itself. It does not matter. I don't need it to have a sprite. I just need it to exist so that its events can be processed and things like that. I'm going to go into the create event. Can I make this bigger? I can make this bigger. That's awesome. I'm going to go into this create event. Let's go one step up and say part system equals part system create. That doesn't take any arguments. The particle system that I just created, these things have to exist before you can do anything else with particles. If you try to create particles outside of this, the game will probably not work. The second thing that I need to do is say part emitter equals part emitter create. I'm not used to pronouncing my letter T like that, but it just did twice. And it's going to take one argument, and the argument is going to be part system, or whatever you called your particle system variable that you just created. The third thing is going to be part type create. And that also doesn't take any arguments, and I just need to assign this to a variable as well. Part type, I'll call it, because I'm not very imaginative. So, the emitter, as you can probably tell by the name, is I don't really want to call it an object because it's not an object in the same sense as this thing that I just created is. I'm going to call it a thing that emits particles when you tell it to, or automatically if you want it to do that automatically. And the part type is basically a template, a blueprint, if you will, for the individual particles that are created. So if I go back to my fire example, and that's going to launch over here. If I go back to this fire example, each one of these, you can sort of see the cloud objects. Again, I don't want to call them objects. Each one of the little cloud pictures is an instance of the particle type. So to make the emitter emit anything, there's a few things that you need to do. Part emitter stream is one of them, but I'll be getting to that later. I don't know why I typed it first. Part emitter region is what I wanted to type. System is part system. The emitter index is part emitter. Xmin, let's make that 50. Xmax can be 100. Ymin can also be 50. Ymax can also be 100. The shape, I'll explain these arguments in a moment, but the shape can be PS shape. Let's go with rectangle for the time being. And distribution can be PS distribution linear for the time being. I'll explain what the other options do later on. So Xmin and Xmax, Ymin and Ymax, these essentially form the corners of a shape that the particles will be created inside of. So in my case, it's a square that stretches from 50-50 to 100-100. And if I were to say now, part, that's not how you spell part, emitter stream, the part system is part system, the index is part emitter, the particle type is part type, and the number, let's say, 4. This will cause, did I get anything wrong? It does not look like I did. This will cause 4 particles of type part type to be emitted from this emitter of this system at a regular interval, in other words, every step. So if I were to run the game now, you would see that it will start emitting particles here. And those do not look very good because I didn't assign it a sprite, which I should probably do now. So underneath part type, where all the other particle type code is going, I'm going to say part type sprite. And I'm going to call, let's see, what do I need? I need the index, that makes sense, part type. I need the sprite index, which in my case is the name of this, which is spr smoke. Oops. Get back in the screen, you. spr smoke. Animating. This is a true or false value. I do not want it to animate, although it won't anyway because it only has 1 frame, so we're going to say false. Stretch the animation. This will stretch the animation out to... there is a helicopter flying by outside. I hope you can't hear that. This will stretch the animation out to as long as the particle is in existence. Its lifespan, as it were. I'm also going to call that false. And a random sprite. Random... Helicopter, go away. I'm just going to wait this out. Alright, much better. Again, random. Well, if you have more than 1 subimages per sprite in the sprite, it will choose a random subimage for each particle that it spawns. And I also want that to be false. And now I have the correct number of arguments in there, don't I? Now, if I were to run the game, it would actually spawn smoke at the rectangle on the screen where I told it to, instead of dots. Much better. There are a few built-in particle types. I think you can access them via part type. What is it? Part type shape. And I could say part type and pt shape disk or cloud or flare. I'm gonna go with flare because that sounds cool. I'm gonna comment out the sprite line, and we shall see what this looks like. There we have there's somewhat more rounded clouds that are forming around that rectangle on the screen. These shapes may be good enough for your purposes. You can see circle, cloud, disk, explosion, flare, line, pixel, ring, smoke. Pixel, I believe, is the default one. Snow, spark, sphere, square, and star. Those may be good enough for your purposes. If you do not want to go messing around with specific sprites for particles, that's up to you. Anyway, the next thing that I want to do is make, because I had the fire in my other example following the mouse cursor around, instead of defining region over here, I'm going to cut that and paste it into the step event. So it's going to be running, instead of at creation, it's going to be running every frame. And we'll say mouse x minus, I think, 32. Alright, I can't talk and type at the same time, apparently, so I'm just going to have this written out without saying anything. I believe this is the dimensions of the square that the fire in my other example was spawning at. Mouse x minus 32 to mouse x plus 32 for x min and x max. The same thing for mouse y over here for y min and y max. Distribution, I'm going to leave that as rectangular, and distribution, rectangular distribution. Distribution, I'm going to leave linear, and shape is going to stay rectangular. And now, instead of saying stream automatically from the emitter in the create event, I'm going to say part emitter burst. And burst is going to, instead of emit a continuous stream of particles from the emitter, it's going to create a certain number of particles once and then not do it again until it's called again, which in my case will be every step of the game. So I'm going to say system needs to be part system, emitter needs to be part emitter, part type needs to be part type, and number I'm going to spawn, how about 4? Every step of the game. This is going to have a very similar effect to part emitter stream, but I'm just going to do it now so that I have more control over it. And you can see the trail of smoke is now following the mouse cursor around, which is what we want. So the next thing that we're going to do to make this look like smoke is we're going to set a couple properties of these part types. And after part type sprite, I can say part type, how about alpha? Alpha 3, alpha 1, or alpha 2. These are very similar. Alpha 1 will just define the transparency of a sprite once, and it's going to stay that way for the entire duration of the particle's lifetime. Alpha 2, you can set a starting and ending transparency for the particle type. So you can have it start at 1 and fade out to 0, or you can have it start at 0, fade out to 1. Personally, I think that would look a little silly. And alpha 3, which is what I'm going to look for, is going to take part type. It's going to take a starting alpha, which in my case is going to be 0. It's going to take a middle alpha, which in my case is going to be 1, and it's going to take an ending alpha, which is going to be also 0. So it's going to fade in and then fade out. Similarly, part type color 3, or color, I should show them all, color 1, 2, or 3. You can set the particle's color once and have it last for the entire duration of the thing's existence. You can have you can pick a starting color and an ending color and have it transition between the two. Or again, in my case, you can choose part type. You can choose a starting color, which I'm going to say C white. I'm going to call C white, color underscore white. You can choose a middle color, C yellow, and you can choose an ending color, C red. So it's going to start at white, it's going to fade to yellow, and then it's going to fade to red. So let's run the game again, if you can call this a game. I think I say that every tutorial I make when it's more like an example. You can see they're fading in and they're fading out. They're starting at white, they're transitioning to yellow, and they're fading out to red. This in and of itself is a fairly cool particle demonstration that you can mess around with, but it's not fire, and I did say I was going to make fire. And to do that, there are a few other settings that I would like to set. The next thing that I would like to do is how about part type life is going to be a function that defines how long the particles last on the screen. We're going to say part type, once again, life min. So this is the number of steps that it's going to last. You could make it a hard-coded value like 50 or 64 or some other number. Or you could try to make it a little bit frame rate independent and say room speed for the lower value, and how about room speed times 1.5 or something of that nature for the upper value. And this will cause the particles to last for that number of steps. Room speed, I believe, is 60? Oh no, the more proper way to do this, I'm still thinking in terms of Game Maker Studio 1, but this would be game, come on, select it, game, get, speed, game speed FPS. And we can say the same thing, game, get, speed, game speed FPS, FPS please, thank you. Anyway, this function is just going to return the speed of the game, how many steps per game are executed, how many frames per second of the game are rendered. So it should be 60, it may be 30. If I were to go into options, there should be an option for, okay, so game frames per second is actually 60. I'm going to set that to, or game frames rather is 30. I'm going to set that to 60 and come back here. So the particles will last about a second is what I'm trying to get at. The next thing, because they're a little bit big, is part type scale. We're going to say part type, and the X scale is going to be 0.5. The Y scale is going to be 0.5 as well. Unfortunately, there isn't a part scale 1, 2, or 3 option the way there is with alpha and color. You can't have the particles change scale over the course of their lifetime. If that were an option, that would be really nice, because you'd be able to make the particles shrink or expand or something as time went on, and it would give a slightly smokier impression. Anyway, that's a small complaint. I don't know if Yo-Yo Games will ever implement that or not. Probably not. I should just move on. The last thing that I want to do is part type gravity, and this is going to be part type gravity amount. We'll say how about 0.5 pixels per step squared, and the gravity direction can be 90. Because in Game Maker directions, 90 is straight up, 0 is to the, I'm pointing and I don't know my directions, 0 is to the right, 180 is to the left, and 270 is straight down. Directions are measured in degrees, obviously. So if I were to run the game now, or the demonstration, or whatever I want to call it, this shouldn't take long, and indeed, we have fire. And they're rising towards the top of the screen a little faster than I would really like, so I'm going to make this, how about 0.25? Or let's make it even lower than that. How about 0.15? I think I did 0.25 in my example on the that I showed at the beginning. This is not. I set the scale, didn't I? Yeah, that was 0.5. All right. part type gravity, 0.15. Not scale. That looked really strange. All right, so now you have fire. It's pretty satisfying. It's starting at white, it's turning to yellow, and it's fading to red. If you were to go type part type underscore and then hit control space and bring up this menu of all the other particle type related functions that you can use. There are quite a few of them. If you ever want to know what one does, perhaps part type speed, you can select it, you can type it out and middle click it with the mouse wheel and it'll open up the help file. This works in both GameMaker Studio 1 and 2. And here you can see the part type speed takes a couple arguments. You can see what the arguments do. You can see a short text description of what it does down here. And you can see an example of it down here. The same goes for emitters and systems, part system underscore and then control space. There's a couple functions that you can use in relation to particle systems, although most of them have to do with how they're drawn, what layer they're drawn at, their depth, whether or not they update automatically, which in this case here is yes. In other games that you make, you may not want them to update automatically. You may want to have more control over when they update, and reposition all the particle sprites and what have you. Emitters have fewer function, it seems. You can define a burst or a stream, like I did earlier. You can define a region where they're streamed from. You can check if they exist, create them, destroy them, clear them, all that fun stuff. If you want to get rid of all the particles that have been emitted from a system, perhaps you change rooms or something like that. Anyway, that's about it. I did say that I would mess around a little bit with the shape and the linear distribution. So how about I change part shape rectangular to part PS shape diamond, and change linear to, how about, I think inverse Gaussian will make more particles spawn around the outside than the inside, I think. I may not actually be able to see. Alright, well that's a satisfyingly diamond shape, and it does look, I think, this might be my imagination, but I think the particles are more dense around the outside of the fire than around the inside. But anyway, that's fire. That's the essentials of how particle systems work. Again, I will have project files that you can download in the description of the video for both GameMaker Studio 1 and GameMaker Studio 2. For now, my name is Dragonite. I hope you all enjoyed this and I hope you all learned something. If you create anything cool with particles yourself, do take a screenshot and send it to me in the comments of this video. And I will see you all later.